Joining us now is my good friend, Julianna Forlano. Now, Julianna is many things. She is a professor. She is a writer. She is a pundit. She is a radio show host. She is a political satirist. She produces these very funny one-minute things called Absurdity Today, and she's here with us now. I think you got your own show. Julianna, thanks for coming on the program.
It's my pleasure.
And I think you have your own show, too, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I'm on WBAI and Progressive Voices, and I'm soon to be on We Act Radio alongside you.
Right, I know.
Exciting, right?
It's
yeah,
awesome.
I'm really excited about that.
It's awesome. And for the record, I did know the answer to that question when I asked it. But hey, thanks for coming on the program.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure. A lot of stuff going on.
Oh my God, we could talk forever, but let's start and about pretty much anything. But the thing, you know what I saw just now was a news story about the Planned Parenthood and the fact that Indiana, the state of Indiana, has cleared Planned Parenthood in fetal tissue investigation. That's the headline. Planned Parenthood facilities in the state did not violate any laws, the investigation found. So, of course, now all of the supposed shock and horror on the right and all the outrages are going to go away, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, I found it interesting that it came from Indiana because Governor Mike Pence, the Republican, has been a long-term champion of efforts to defund and undermine Planned Parenthood. He's the one who ordered the investigation by the Indiana State Department of Health. Perhaps he was expecting a different result, but he got the all clear for Planned Parenthood. I wonder if he was expecting it to be something else when he asked for that call.
Well, it's a great point. And let's go back a couple steps. And speaking of questions to which I think I know the answer anyway, just give our listeners a quick overview of what this whole Planned Parenthood kerfuffle is really all about. So
these folks called the Center for Medical Progress. Now, mind you, there was no Center for Medical Progress before these guys went into a Planned Parenthood in Denver, Colorado, and shot some undercover video with, I guess, a body cam or some sort of hidden camera. And then they brought it out and edited it so that it looked like the people who are working for Planned Parenthood were selling the parts and profiting off body parts of aborted, fetal tissue.
Right.
And basically it's not true. Now, first of all, just so that we're all clear on the law is that you can donate tissue for scientific and medical research
right.
In any area, right? So it's kind of interesting that there's this enormous outrage that the donation of fetal tissue is, that's something that we won't have any of. People are up in arms about this.
And the fact is that the law which permitted, let me just jump in for a second, if I recall correctly, the law permitting this was passed in the 1990s or so, and it was Mitch McConnell, among others, who voted in favor of this law.
Right, which makes it even more interesting that Mitch McConnell is at the forefront of trying to defund Planned Parenthood. The Senate GOP is fast-tracking a bill possibly to be voted on Monday before, the entire Congress leaves for its August recess. And he's at the forefront of trying to push this stuff through, which is really interesting. I see an enormous parallel with what happened with Acorn. Remember Acorn, that
Sure.
whole thing about, this agency is allowing people to double vote. And it was that... just to remind the listeners, people went out, someone went into Acorn with a hidden camera, and then they doctored up footage. And regardless of the fact that the footage is doctored, it's clearly doctored, and it has been shown to be doctored, the scandal continued to dominate on the news, mainstream news. And just like this scandal, we have no investment in what's really going on. They just want a scandal. And, I'm hearing on Fox News, people like Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity saying that the entire 2016 election should be based on abortion rights.
You know,
and I thought that is the craziest thing I've ever heard.
You know, it's really interesting that now that you mentioned, we're talking with Julianna Forlano, radio host and political satirist and professor and many other things, and about the Planned Parenthood video sting and fraudulent misrepresentation of what they did. You know, if you go back and you read, let's say, the early literature on propaganda, whether it's Edward Bernays, who was Freud's nephew, or whether it was Joseph Goebbels, or to pick the other side of the great conflict of the 20th century, whoever you read about, you always get that really you choose events and you use them to symbolize your position. And it seems to me that the reason why, you know, you mentioned that truth is irrelevant in whether it's the Acorn sting or now the Planned Parenthood sting. That really seems to be because the right is very good at unscrupulously finding a moment and using it to leverage their issues. I remember 6 months ago, everybody was saying that, you know, the whole issue of the whole idea of the right running on social issues is dead. They're losing the leverage. They can't excite their base over abortion anymore. They can't excite their base over, you know, the gay marriage issue is fading away for them. The country's evolving past them. They've really lost the social thing. And so what have they got? Now, all of a sudden, there's this Planned Parenthood sting, and they've got a social issue because now it's being framed as this horrifying and insensitive sale of, you know, of fetal tissue. So it doesn't it kind of show that those guys, however unethical they may be, are kind of super smart in some ways?
Well, they're very good at twisting a message so that the conservative and Christian right can find moral outrage upon which I mean, it's almost like people are addicted to moral outrage. If we could imagine, for one moment, if we could take moral outrage, put it aside, and make decisions that are for the best interest of all concerned without moral outrage, I mean, the Republicans would have zero platform about anything. I mean, there a lot of what passes for drumming up support is drumming up moral outrage. And, you know, I was brought up Catholic, and I was brought up in a family that was, you know, a member of organized labor, and we were labor Catholics, and there were not, you know, this whole push for being a one-issue voter, voting on abortion as one issue that you vote on, and that's it, regardless of what else Jesus may or may not have suggested. No war, you know, loving your neighbor, etc., you know, economic justice, those things. That they have done such a great job getting people to vote against their own interests by using these hot topic moral things. I just don't know if it's going to work this time.
I don't know. I mean, it's gotten a lot of traction, and you know, it's good. I'm glad you mentioned the whole Catholic aspect of it. I had a Catholic grandmother, but she was from France, and she was born many years ago. And she never thought twice about. She was very Catholic. She constantly told my mother that your children are going to hell because they don't pray properly, which was terrifying, by the way, when I was 8 or whatever. But
yes, thanks, Nana.
Right, thanks for the nightmares. Yeah, but. You know, she would, I'm sure, in her entire lifetime, never gave a thought to abortion. Abortion was not an especially Catholic issue. There were other Catholic issues, of course, you know, public morality and all that. But you know, that has been shoehorned into the Catholic issue. And I just want to get this off my chest because, you know, Bill Donahue, who runs the right-wing Catholic League organization, you know, the right-wing Catholics always insult ordinary Catholics, which the vast majority.
Oh, yeah.
They always say you're a cafeteria Catholic. Have you ever heard of that one?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, because
I was on Fox News recently, and someone was like, "Well, you're just not a good enough Catholic."
Right. Well, and the cafeteria.
How do you know?
How do you know? Right. The cafeteria Catholic insult means, well, you pick and choose like you're at a cafeteria, which doctrine you want and which you don't. But who are the real cafeteria Catholics here? Because here they make everything about abortion. They ignore 1,000 years of the Catholic Church's teachings on just war. They ignore the fact that even Pope John Paul II, who was pretty conservative in a lot of ways, said that Iraq was an unjust war, said that our military policy was unjust, said the militarization of world societies is unjust. Now we've got Pope Francis, who says that the modern form of capitalism is unjust and the pursuit of wealth is a dehumanization of people. All of a sudden, who's the cafeteria Catholic now?
Exactly. And they don't point out, with this, back to this particular issue of Planned Parenthood, they don't point out that the fetal tissue, first of all, that is, they're all into the Old Testament, I guess, with the punishing and the going to hell, because it seems like if a woman needs to have an abortion, she gets categorized with a big scarlet A on her chest, and she's a fallen woman and she's a terrible person. And so therefore, this idea that, maybe something good can come out of the unfortunate fact that a woman had to make the choice, or, just made the choice, whatever the case may be, to have an abortion, that tissue could go on to do something like contribute to vital research, treatments for Parkinson's, MS, Alzheimer's, spinal cord injury,
right,
birth defects, HIV, all that stuff. This is not they're trying to take the stance of, we're the compassionate ones that care about the lives of unborn, quote unquote, unborn children, and the other side is not compassionate, but it seems like their stance is far less compassionate to a far greater number of beings.
Right. I used to say that a conservative is somebody who believes in the right to life from the moment of conception to the moment they're born Iraqi. But yeah, I take your point. I very strongly take your point, Julianna Forlano, radio host and political satirist and professor. But and I guess there's another dimension of it that's really important that we haven't touched on, which it seems like besides these right-wing cafeteria Catholics who pick their issues and then obsess about them to the detriment of the teachings of the church, for sure. And to human decency, I would add. There's the one area, the one thing that all these issues seem to have in common, whether it's abortion, whether it's premarital sex, whether it's what have you, is the fact that they involve women.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yes. Absolutely.
What's up with that? Where does it? Is this like a psychological? Is this just like they're so frightened of women that they're afraid to allow women any degree of power, even if it's just simple autonomy over their own bodies?
I don't know. That's really a fascinating question from in addition to all those things you listed as what I did, I used to work as a psychotherapist. So I have a clinical degree, and I think about this in terms of psychotherapy and clinical practice, because it certainly seems like there's an ingrained idea that women are less than in the Catholic Church. Women cannot serve as priests. That
right.
is, only men can be spiritual leaders. Only men can be the go-between between you and God, which, if we're going to have a conversation about religion, I think it's absolutely apocryphal that a church says you can't have a direct relationship with the universe or with God or with any kind of deity or power. I have to stand in between you and that thing.
Right.
That's just the worst possible thing that religions can do, is break people apart from themselves and have them following rules instead of following what their own dictates of their own conscience might be. But I do believe there is a strong and historical line of thought saying that women are less than, women are bad, they're unclean, they're dirty, they're the temptress. Adam would have been totally fine if Eve didn't come out naked, wearing a fig, and tempt him with the apple. We would all still be living in the Garden of Eden. It's that they've never looked at that and said, I don't think exactly that maybe we should drop that attitude. They never did,
right.
A personal inventory and rethought some of their attitudes.
Right. Now, where is this coming from exactly? Let me go deep on this. No, and Julianna Forlano, I forgot that you were a therapist in a past life, and I guess it makes this topic the perfect one for you, because it seems to me that a lot of what's happening is, I got to say this. I think a lot of people who disagree with me on the women's right to choose issue, I think they're sincere. I just think that many of them are acting out some sort of internal conflict and projecting it onto the outer world, kind of in the way you described. Now, I will tell you this: that the anti-abortion activists who are also laying down in front of military vehicles and are also going to jail for protesting executions or whatever, I disagree with them here on certain issues, but I respect them because there's an integrity to their position. They believe what I don't believe, but in the case of right to choose, but at least they're consistent in their defense of life as they understand it to exist. So I guess maybe as a closer, I would say, is there some way we can talk to these people, since you're a therapist and you talk to people, to persuade them rather than just yelling at each other across, picket lines or whatever?
That brings me to an interesting story, and I'll keep it quick because I know we're at the end of the segment. But I went to the Democratic Convention in Charlotte, and there were anti-abortion protesters, pro-life protesters, with all the very graphic signage. And a lot of people have been saying that this whole Planned Parenthood video thing was just to get the vision of the fetus out into the minds of people. Mm-hmm. The bloody fetus. So they were out there back at the convention. They were out there with their signs, and they were yelling and screaming. And I approached a man who was there, and I just was curious. And I approached out of a sense of curiosity because I have my position. But as I said, I do understand the position, especially of people who are pro-life, especially when they are pro-peace,
right,
and pro-justice in all these other ways as well. And what I said, but do you think the signs are going to help? I mean, you're not going to win any converts with the yelling. And even as I was talking to the guy, someone else came up and yelled at him. I mean, people are crazy. Yeah. Okay. And he said, probably not. I said, what about, instead of protesting, creating adoption centers or supporting children, et cetera, supporting the mothers through their pregnancies if it's a matter of money or whatever the issue may be. And he said, well, we do that a little bit, but this is the convention.
This is the
convention. They were there to make a fuss and to yell at us and to get back yelled at. So they,
Well, I get that, but unfortunately we're going to have to wrap it up there. But I guess I would just say that if I was if I was trying to save a life, I wouldn't yell. I would persuade. But anyway, and that's kind of what you're saying.
Well said.
And Julianna Forlano, radio host and professor and all sorts of other cool things. Thanks so much for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me on. I love your show. It's a joy to be here.
Thank you. A joy to have you. We'll be right back after this. I am Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.